we want to pick up on these issues of how attitudes, perceptions influence refugee integration into hosting countries. What I'd like to do, because they will do it better than me, is ask each of the panelists to just explain what you do. And Rita, you've just made a point to me about what you're doing with Canada.
I'm convinced, with all the data we have already, change is possible. It has not to be as it is now, and it is a complicated situation because even those who are really fearing terrorism, on the other side, they are
Could I just ask you to just explain what you do at the moment, because you were making a point about a new commission that you're involved in, and just to identify what you're doing.
Perhaps I work since 1904 in this area. And I had a German commission, and then a European, and then an international. I learned a lot in the commission of Kofi Annan, where I really visited different countries of the world, especially Africa.
And now what you're doing?
Nowadays, I belong to a Canadian commission, recently established to work on the topic, what can we do to reduce dilemmata, traumata, a miserable situation in the refugee camps.
All right.
And not only by government, but also by citizens. I don't reduce on NGOs, because a lot of people working together to improve the situation are not organized NGOs, but citizens, as in Germany, as in Africa and elsewhere.
Right. That's what you're doing at the moment. Let me come back to you. And Gianni D'Amato, what you're doing, the Expert Council of German Foundations on Integration and Migration. For me as a non-German, to have an expert council is fascinating.
Yes, it's indeed fascinating. And we are writing an annual report in which basically all hot issues which are in the German debate can be dealt, and this will be presented each April to the larger audience.
And you get a consensus between all the foundations, do you?
No, but the foundations are the sponsors to find a consensus among the experts, which is not always easy, but there is one.
All right, fine. Laurie, we've got a bias towards Canada on this panel.
Yes, I'm from Canada. I'm a professor in the Sociology department at the University of Manitoba, and my area of expertise is around the successful economic integration of refugees, but also helping Canadians understand the positive benefits of refugees and migration movements.
All right, and Andrus, you've had a long walk to get here from the Auswärtiges Amt.
Yeah. So I'm a civil servant. I serve my country as a diplomat in the Foreign Ministry in the Department of Culture and Communication. And it's basically, it's a sushi roll. You all know that urumaki inside-out roll. So our job is to bring the outside in and the inside out. That's all we are doing. And in the last years, well, we were looking for our changes to be made to orient political policies abroad towards access to culture and education, saying that it's not only a role of humanitarian aid, but what we are doing is giving aid to humanity by culture and education.
And what's the connection between culture and communication and what this country has been going through, the political and civil impact of the enormity of 2015-16?
Yeah, usually everybody's working with concept as emotional intelligence or the IQ, but there has to be something like cultural intelligence also. So understanding the tales, understanding the narratives, understanding the underlying assumptions of society, of our own society, which made a long way to understand that it's a society of immigration, and that was thanks to Rita Süssmuth. And well, the Bosch Foundation did tremendous work in 2015-16 on that. And you presented a bold report on 16 to the German president and made that shift for the German perceptions. And also getting outside and understand more, perhaps taking the example of Iran, what Iran is actually doing for the refugees.
And quickly, can I just ask you, has it been a question of the public service catching up with the reality in this country quickly?
Sure.
Good. Okay, now we're clear. Good, right. Well, because that's important, because the scale of what is happening and the scale of what was known would happen, and then the impact on the public service to handle this, and others as well, and civil society. Let me just ask you to pick up on some of what we've heard from Dirk. Gianni D'Amato, from your reflection on integration and migration from the expert council.
Yes. Basically, I completely agree with Dirk and his assessment of attitudes and how they are composed. But I think we have also to talk about the politicization of the issue of migration and also integration, because we are now dealing about refugees, but one of the next hot issues is always integration. And it was already said today, if it comes to integration, then obviously the Muslim thing, the Muslim issue is one of the hottest ones, because if it refers to Muslims, then you have very, very odd attitudes against any form of immigration and integration. And this is quite common all over Europe in many European countries. And here we converge. The Muslim theme, the Muslim issue is creating negative attitudes towards integration. And we have to understand this sort of perception.
Just to keep the microphone, just to underscore what Dirk said, I'm using the word myself. Opportunistic. What about politicians? Your view about what politicians have done, given what he said, that they were exploiting it?
Yeah, Dirk is also right with regard to politics. Basically, we made a claim analysis in order to see how over 20 years the issue of immigration and integration has been dealt with. And we thought that activists or any other sort of NGOs had the lead, but this is not the case. The lead is taken by the by the parties in governments. They have the capacity to set the agenda, and they have also the capacity to set the next themes much stronger than any other actors.
But given you're not serving in a government,
no, not at all.
What would you say about the dynamic which takes place, which leads to this misrepresentation of the problem for political gain?
Yeah, I think the dynamic is that parties may react to the moods, but they can also interpret the moods and can say that there is a need to change, and we have to fuel the debate in a certain direction. And this is basically starting out a lot of new claims, also by activists, or also by NGOs, and also by social movements from the left, and particularly from the right, who are not agreeing, or are agreeing and are strengthening certain movements.
Would you say this has exacerbated the issue of migration, has made worse the issue of migration, which was going to be an issue anyway, but the politicization and radicalization has made it worse?
It has given to the issue another dynamic, obviously.
A more sinister dynamic?
A more sinister dynamic, yes.
Okay. Right. Let me ask Laurie. Again, you're coming from university, so you can talk with total impartiality and independence here. What do you think of what Gianni's just been saying?
I do agree with what you have to say, but I also think that change is hard, and so politicians, some of them, and some political parties don't want to change, and so they prey on the misperceptions and stereotypes held by particular groups of people. So, I've seen politicians in my own country that pander to this idea that Muslims in particular are some sort of threat to Canadian society, instead of listening to the data that they readily have at hand about the positive cultural contributions. And so instead of pressing for change, they take the easy route. And then there's media too who take the easy route too, who purposely pass on bad information to people who may not know. If you've never met an immigrant, and it's still very possible in my country, it's very easy for you to fall into that trap and to believe stuff if you hear it on TV, or then it's followed by politicians who say these sorts of things that are willfully incorrect.
Rita Süssmuth.
Perhaps to continue, the misunderstanding is also there because a lot of people don't know what it is to be a Muslim. Because in our country, the empirical studies show nearly 90% are living peacefully together with one another. And we confuse with the so-called Islamic State, with the fundamentalists, and those people who are more threatened than even the German ones, the Muslims themselves. So we have to see both sides, and in so far we need a new narrative in order not to lose those that we punish now by exclusion for being peaceful.
Where do you think the new narrative can come from? Because that word has come up several times already, a new narrative. But how does that narrative get created when there's so much emotion?
It is coming from terrorism, and it is also coming from the wish to have homogeneous societies that we don't have since long. But we believe before it was a homogeneous society, especially all the migrants coming before were German origin. Nowadays, it's really a mixed composition. And I think that's one narrative. And the other narrative is that we neglected to inform people what it is to belong to a Muslim society, how many tendencies there are as in other religions. And it's not only the religion here, it's political power. And therefore, when you asked before the political and the cultural role, they are in between, because every political system is at the same time involved in a cultural system. This strong differentiation and distinction between cultural and political is a big risk and even a threat, because we believe cultural is unpolitical and political is dangerous. So we need another view upon political and cultural. For instance, what you said this morning about Poland. Poland has quite another history. After 1989, with the wish to become really a member within the European Union. But when you look around nowadays, what is going on in Poland and Hungary and even in Czech Republic, you have a much more national view and even nationalist view, because they believe we don't play the role which we want to wish within the European Union. So we see this complicated dependence from historical development to new developments. And we have to exchange much more with those states in the Middle Eastern European countries, first to understand them, second, not to lose them, but win them back.
All right. Andreas, can I ask you, obviously this is a very complex time in Germany, politically and in so many ways, because of what the election has revealed. But what can you say to us or talk with us about today on what you see has been happening in this country when it comes to understanding the influence and the attitudes? Because one of the issues is angst, and literally, and I saw this a few days ago in Eastern Europe, hate towards incomers.
Let me try to give an answer on three levels. Yes, first of all, there is a question of political leadership, and words are shaping a society. So to be very careful on the words, on the concepts you utilize, will have a tremendous impact on society. Just giving one example. In Germany, you can read in the newspapers, listen to political speeches, and they talk about a flood coming from the east. This is a concept developed in the 19th century. It hasn't existed before. And now it's part of our official speeches, of the discourse. And I'm convinced from the moment on you reflect upon that concept of a flood, which had been in the 19th century one of the explanations of the origin of humanity and was discussed in the field of archaeology. You have to work on it. It will take years and years. First aspect is on leadership and to be careful on words, on images. Second is not to be too selfish. We are living in a very rich country. Germany has proved after 45 that it was able to construct a society with 14 million people coming in, and they were not better treated in 49 or in 50 or in 55 than the refugees coming in 2015. So it's not a question on the cultural origin. It's just a question how to deal with that issue. And the third aspect is, well, we told our people that a national state exists and that it is a homogeneous national state. That's a concept coming from law in the 19th century to explain what is a national state. And now we are challenged with the globalization. So what we see is we don't have any longer sovereignty on the economic issues. We don't have any longer sovereignty on the threats of terrorism and on the security issues. And now some people are getting back and saying, okay, but at least let's stay in a homogeneous cultural group of people and let's keep that kind of cultural sovereignty and close it up. And that's exactly the wrong way to do. But that will take years and years and years. And I'm very thankful to the orientation the French president is giving, actually talking about that sovereignty which has to be defined on a European level, and talking about, as he did in Bamako last week, talking about the fact that we have to open up our minds and our museums to what has been getting in, what we got in from Africa, and there's something to be given back. And we all had that discussion in the 70s. You might, some of the elders might remember the trial given in the 70s to all those questions, through the question of North and South, the Willy Brandt Commission, the work done in the United Nations, the UNESCO initiatives on education. So we lost perhaps 40 years on those issues, and we have to catch up.
There's one question here, just a bit for you to bear in mind, from a welcome culture in 2015 to a negative attitude towards refugees in German society. Can you name conditions as to what politics must do now, also for a new narrative? Can I just pause that for a moment? But can I just come to you, Andreas, as the public servant on the panel? And I'm asking you this rhetorically because I think I know the answer from a number of other civil servants in a number of other countries with the big project I'm doing on thinking the unthinkable. The frustration often among public servants on this issue and other issues about the measured tones in which they brief politicians, but then the way the politicians exacerbate the issue by the language they use.
No, absolutely not. We are civil servants. We are paid to serve our country and to a certain level to give advice to politicians. And politicians are those who on Saturday and Sunday are out on the marketplaces, and they pay with their bodies, they pay with their minds for what they are doing. And I do not consider that it's up to a civil servant to criticize a politician. So if he wants to do, he has to get on the political side. First aspect. Second is, I really would like to challenge your remarks on higher education, so the higher educated people help, and those who feel threatened do not help. Because if you have a look on the AfD, for example, in Germany, well, they are highly educated German professors. So I'm not as certain as it might have been shown up in that slide, that the higher educated people are more willing to help and to support than the less educated people.
Laurie and Gianni, just on that particular point, can I just ask you, because you were nodding at that point when I raised that point with Andreas?
I often wonder because we have the same issue in Canada too, that there's people who are on the far right who are highly educated who are buying into this too. But if you look at the data that they use to make their points, often it ignores all the positive stuff, and they focus so much on the small number of people who might cause a problem that without showing the whole picture. And I think that that's disingenuous at best and unconscionable at worst.
And the challenge for civil servants?
I think the challenge for civil servants is, you have to go with whatever government that's in place, right? You're stuck. So you try to provide good, solid information to the politicians and hope that they'll use it in good, solid ways.
Gianni, because you were nodding as well when I used the word angst and hate.
Yes, because basically Dirk is right on the large when he says that the educated are basically more in favor than the less educated. But he's wrong when it comes to the prediction of a crisis or a prediction of a turn. There also the highly educated lose a lot of their liberalism quite soon, because then they also try to put their things on safe. And this was the result of a research we have done in Switzerland with regard to attitudes and the prediction of risks. With regard to the other question you had, I think it's
the language.
Yes, but basically who shall do something? I think this can't be delegated to the politicians, this cannot be delegated to the parties. I think all of us, all actors and all associations within a society do have to do anything in order to go in the direction they would like to. The question is, what is the direction? And I would say that the direction within a liberal configuration must be that we respect basic values, and this is basically also the values of people to save their lives, and also to be in accordance with regulations we had when we invited people to come, because this is also a story which made Germany and many other countries of Europe countries of immigration. So there is a story and a legacy which has changed us. And this is, I think, the major cleavage when it comes to this sort of discussions. The cleavage is between those who accept, and accept also this linkage of different populations within a society, and those, as others said already before, who refuse this. They would like to have a society in which they have complete cultural control. And this is obviously the cleavage of our times.
Just before I go to Rita, a note here from Barbara Ischinger. Yes, there is fear in Germany about migrants, but the contributions of civil society have been huge, and still today a large percentage of the German population is for welcoming refugees. Rita Süssmuth.
I would say very clearly, the civil society is more than NGOs, and really when we will say good messages about Germany, first of all, I would say there is a development in their own democratic understanding, not selfish, but really we have to do something. We have to help the people who need it. That's not so normal as we expected, but there is a broad movement. We wouldn't have escalated situations without the help of the citizens to bring better situations for the refugees. And that's a new experience. So there is both fears and open-minded people. And I have to say, I'm a politician myself, but we need absolutely better narratives and better enlightenment to our citizens, because they can't know all this complexity.
But Rita Süssmuth, do you think many of them want to be enlightened in the current crisis? I say that in all seriousness.
Yes.
They have a fixture in their mind.
Yes, you have fixed people you can't reach, but you have to talk with them. To say we will no longer speak with them because they are so fixed in their minds is a mistake, because we have to speak above all with so fixed people, but we have a lot of signs of encouragement, because when I see the younger generation, as you said from your country and experience, it's a new generation, not only to look at higher education and their own career, but what makes sense, what is our obligation towards human beings. It's not ethnicity, but even if you have these fixed-mind people, when they knock at the door and you open and you are face in face with those people in need, they help even. It's also the case in Eastern Germany as in Western Germany. So I think it's very important to look at the changes already starting and going off, not only in the developed countries, but also in the less developed countries in development.
Right. I put on the table those two thoughts from Mr. Rashdorf about can you name conditions as to what politics must do now, also for a new narrative. And Maria Aguero, please insist on the issue of responsible media. That's a difficult one. Let's not get talking about too much about the media here. They are key to fostering that new narrative. Bear that in mind, because I want to open it up. Please keep sending me messages. But given that, Laurie, you're editor-in-chief of the Journal of International Migration and Integration, this sensitivity of language, which presumably you have to look at, you have to edit, and the kind of language you see coming in before you publish it, and what kind of calibration do you have when it comes to language?
I actually don't have to do a lot of calibration. So in the 5 years that I've been the editor of the journal, I've only had to send away 2 papers that were blatantly racist. Like I couldn't in good conscience even consider reviewing them. But most of the language of the people who are sending me papers are actually very positive and very, I don't have to worry so much about that language.
What do you see, though, more generally, about language, about the way language is almost corrupting an understanding of the problem?
I think outside the academic world, in the real world, there is a problem with corruption of language and how we, we're apt to call something fake news if we don't agree with the proposition.
Do you see that a lot in migration and refugees?
Absolutely, yeah. If I don't like the proposition, then I will call it fake news. And so there's a segment which, according to research, it's about 20% of the Canadian population that is simply will not listen to facts. So if the facts don't match their own personal narrative, they won't listen. But there's about 50% of the population who just doesn't know about immigration. And so they learn about immigration from watching the news, from listening to their politicians. And it's that group of people that I think are mostly open to different kinds of arguments and different sets of facts. So some people are more attracted to the economic arguments that yes, in the short term, refugees do cost money for societies to settle, but in the long term, they're actually economic bonuses. They earn more and pay more in taxes than they ever take out. That's an argument that a lot of people buy into if they don't buy into the humanitarian argument.
Okay, who would like to come in? I want to ask Andreas one. Matthias, do you want to come in? Yes. Sorry, Dirk, sorry.
Well, maybe to react on counter narratives or alternative narratives, I think it's quite important.
And language.
Yeah, and language. Quite important to have a balanced position there, because you do not want to disqualify people that have fear. These fears can be legitimate. And I think that in the narratives you should bring positive stories about what migration brings and what refugees bring as a plus to society. But you should also not be blindsided to the difficulties that it brings and the threats that it brings, also on a cultural level.
But we heard about that use of the word flood, and how emotive, but often unrepresentative that really is. How it's easy to default, almost journalistically, into an assumption of something happening, therefore it must be, and you use a certain word.
That's true, and clearly a lot of political entrepreneurs and media entrepreneurs tap onto this and exaggerate and use discourses that have intentionally or unintentionally very negative effects. But we shouldn't step in the other danger either, in equating everyone that expresses fears and anxiety with regard to changes in society as being exactly the same as xenophobia. And I think there's a risk of too much polarization on every side. So finding a balance there. And obviously it's a complicated story in the sense that it's not one-on-one. It's not that all higher educated are positive towards migration. But we find tendencies there in education clearly. So access to information, that partly is an element that plays a role in having a more open stance towards migration, but an essential element is there to have a balanced view. So positive counter narratives reacting against this discourse of flows and floods and making it kind of a disease-like phenomenon, that's very important, but not taking away the seriousness of legitimate fears of the population either.
Of course, there's a facet, you've mentioned flow and flood. A flow is a relatively measured thing. A flood is emotively much larger and more threatening. So even just that one word or the use of that word can make a difference. Laurie.
I'd just like to say that, of course, we don't want to shut down narratives that increase discussion, but if you talk to people who are fearful about immigration because they fear their culture is going to change, I always ask them, well, do you practice your culture, your religion, your language, your way of life exactly the way your parents did, or the way your grandparents did, or the way your great-grandparents did? People tend to think that culture is static and that other interaction with other cultures, other religions is somehow scary or threatening, when in fact, everybody's culture is changing, everybody's religion changes, and the more and more that we integrate and interact with one another, from an economic standpoint, from a cultural standpoint, even from traveling, culture will change. So I think trying to educate people about the idea that culture is not static, that everybody's changing, is important to combat some of the fearful narrative around culture change.
Andreas, given that you represent the foreign ministry, you're not the inner German ministry, what are you seeing around the world on this issue of culture and communication, particularly on this? I could talk to you about Germany, of course, as well, but is the German experience and the European experience and the radicalization and becoming almost more extremist, is that, in your view, being reflected elsewhere on this issue of migration?
That's really difficult to say. Well, what we see on the first hand is a tremendous increase in what the Americans call soft power from the Chinese side, from the Russian side, from the Turkish side. And that's not about migration crisis. That's just about a power of a national state being a player in a cultural and in a cultural discourse and in education. That's first. Second, on the migration issue, what we try to do is we build up a small unit for strategic communication in my department, and we stepped out of the office of a diplomat and into the field. So we are working together with people who are participants in the social networks in the countries of origin. We are working with a Lebanese journal. We are working in the northern African countries with some important opinion makers, and that will change our perception, and perhaps it will give other kinds of informations into those social networks than the usual suspects will give in.
Are you having any indication of an impact of that process which you've got underway? Does it work?
Yeah, on the first hand it works, but these are only the numbers. So the increase on the Facebook is tremendous, is about 500%. We started 3 weeks ago a campaign called Rumors About Germany, which had a tremendous impact, not only on the social web, but also in the press clipping. So that works out. But don't be naive. That will not have any impact on the economic or social reasons who make people flee.
Andreas, just before I would be interested in the debate about rumors as opposed to whether you might have called it fake news, because actually fake news tends to be rumors. In other words, when you titled your program there, did you think of calling it fake news, or was it only going to be rumors?
Well, you got the answer.
No, you give me your answer.
a more bold answer. Well, I consider fake news as, well, it's so... Everybody uses fake news to say something.
I'm just thinking about the title of your program.
And the title of the program is Rumors for good reasons. not to start with the fake news on the title.
Okay, good. I've got a very interesting challenge here from Nadine Bhutto. Can you elaborate on the role of media, politics and NGOs as regards the communication aspect of shaping public perceptions and how communications must change? Changing the narrative means involving all of them. So bear that in mind. I'm going to get a couple of contributions from the floor. We've got two challenges at the moment. Jamila first. Who's got the other microphone? Please, down to Franz Fischler.
Actually, first of all, I really appreciate the panelists with their wonderful conversation. And secondly, I'm sorry for my voice. I don't know what happened. Just as a reflection, I want to mention that this is politics which has changed the scenario and linked the terrorist or Islamic State with the Muslim. It has no linkages with Islam. More than anybody else, we Muslims have suffered a lot because Daesh or Taliban or Boko Haram or whatever, they are destroying our basic foundations inside our countries.
But do you think this can be reversed or not?
Sorry?
Can it be reversed? Can this perception
It should be reversed.
Can it be?
It should be, and it can be, of course, if we are thinking internationally and we are thinking from the lens of humanity, we can change it, and we should change it.
Thank you, Jamila. I'll keep your voice rested.
Okay. One of my main concerns is this growing difference between the felt perception and the fact-based perception which you presented. Because on the one hand, you can argue this has to do with the fact that we are living in the post-factual society, but at the same time, this is the food for the populists. And therefore, in my view, and this is my question to the panelists, we must find ways how we can close this gap between facts and felt perception. If we are not able to do that, then I think we are doing the work to some degree for the populists.
All right, well, that's interesting because Katie Krauser has just said this. German media and politicians treated migration and refugees very positively in 2015 and 16. In a way, they tried to provide leadership. That has backfired in the sense that people have lost trust in both because they feel the debate is one-sided. How do you provide credible leadership? Katie, where are you? Could I just get the microphone to you? Do you have an answer to your own question, given what Franz Fischler has just raised?
Well, as I was writing it, David talked about it. So I was like, he's sort of answering it. I think the idea is not to leave out any part of the debate, to actually take concerns seriously as well.
But what Franz Fischler has just said is you've got to create a new credibility somewhere.
That I honestly don't know. I work in the media, and this is something we battle with.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I mean,
May I give
Andreas,
a
please.
thought?
Yes.
Because it's thanks to Joachim Rogel that perhaps we will get a clearer view on what's happening in France and in Germany. He's actually dealing out together with the think tank in Germany a deep dive in some of the political, of the challenged parts of Germany and of France, asking questions, what's behind your xenophobia? What's your real concern? And we will present the report in 10 days, I think, something about the 14th or 15th of December. And one of the very interesting facts in that report is if people talk about their threats and about migrants coming in, most of the time they feel disconnected with their own society. And that's something we maybe had forgotten over the last 10 years. There's a kind of double integration to be made. So there's integration of those coming from outside in, but there's also an integration to be done for those who were born in Germany and who do not have the same chances to live their life as others. And in the media, we had in 2015, and you're absolutely right, we had highlighted the humanitarian aid, the engagement of the civil society, and nobody talked about those who were left behind and born in Germany. And that's something where we have to find a way through.
Let me pick up on Francis' point, and then, if I may, just pick up on your point. Gianni, this issue of how on earth do you do it? How do you bridge that gap? How do you narrow that gap? Or destroy the gap between reality and perception?
That's a very interesting question. I would say that there is always a gap between reality and perceptions. I mean, coming from academia, we are basically giving the images who shall give the ideas to understand reality. But it's not reality. We show graphs, we show numbers, we show linked to theories, certain explanations, but this is not reality. We are all fighting on different perceptions in order to understand which direction we should go. And what we see today is that there is basically a sort of divergence of orientations, that some would like to go in certain directions and others in other. And this is basically also the way how it is nowadays.
Do you think it's reversible?
I think it's reversible, but it's quite difficult. It's reversible if if the crisis, if you want to call it that way, is so strong that beyond party lines, people have to come together in order to understand in which direction it shall go.
The perception is not coming from the sky, but it's made by people. That's a very important point. And first of all, let me say that depends in which way we are perceiving migrants and refugees. So, in countries where they have to work as quick as possible, you have less, this gap is smaller than in countries where they have long time to wait what will be their future. That's one point. And the other point is, when we always speak more about the deficit of migrants and refugees than of the potential they have, what can be even improved, and to see what they bring in for societies. Even in Austria, 3 days after coming, they try to let them participate in the housing, in the food, and so on. It's very important to give them an early belonging too, and not you are the different, the aliens. So it's not only a matter of fact that there is hate, but from where it is coming. And I think we have to learn a lot how to improve integration, and both sides have to learn, as he said, not only the migrants, but also our societies.
Laurie,
it's a changing world.
Do you want to pick up on that challenge from Franz Fischler?
Sure. So you'll have to remind me.
Well, how you narrow the gap between emotion and reality, emotion which is not accurately reflecting what is happening.
So I think in today's society, everybody expects things immediately. Things need to be done quickly, and it doesn't give us time to think and reflect, which I know is kind of silly coming from an academic, because that's all we do is think and reflect. But I think we often move too quickly and expect things too quickly. So I've been involved in a few things which have helped to change some of the narratives. So bringing policymakers, academics, media, NGO together to talk about and strategize, talk about problems that each area or sector has, but also to strategize how we get points across. And that takes time, right? That you have to bring people together in a room, you have to build trust. But once that trust is built, now when a media person calls me and they ask me some questions, I actually feel empowered to say, you're asking the wrong questions, or have you considered asking these kinds of questions, so that it does shape the narrative a little bit differently, because usually when a media person calls me or a government person calls me, it's because there's a problem happening. Taking time to make these relationships will help narrow these gaps, but it takes time. It's not going to happen in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. We have to cultivate these relationships.
All right, Christoph Bosch.
Shaping the narrative. It's clear that this is a wish we have, but it's also a huge risk, because exactly that backfiring was about trying to establish a positive narrative, and a big part of the population felt manipulated by it. So if we have that idea that we can use a certain language to have a certain effect, or that we should establish a narrative, we need to question ourselves very much, is this truthful? So a non-truthful narrative, because it has a good purpose, will always have the tendency to backfire in the long range. So I agree that language is extremely important, but objectivity and truth are the major concerns.
Thank you. Ruben.
I think when we are analyzing this whole situation of migration, we need to realize that we're living in a world where people care about future. It's the ideal storm. So many changes happening simultaneously. And xenophobia, nationalism, populism is coming not because of migration, but much broader point of the people scared about future. And they're scared about future, looking backwards, and they're trying to defend their own territory, we're trying to find enemy, somebody outside. This is why analyzing the migration problem, you also analyze all other changes happening in society, by cultural level, by economical level, by many other ways, because otherwise we're just taking one part of the problem, trying to say how we can solve this problem. Because the fake news not only about the migrate, but everything. Yeah, people are so scared what will happen with the way professions, what will happen with the way economic development. That's why I think one of the challenges we're facing today in the next 15, 10, 20 years, how to respond to this type of the big transformation that's happening worldwide from many directions simultaneously.
Andreas, is that your assessment inside government?
Right, I totally agree to what Mr. Bush said. It's not about being on the good side when you talk in public or when you prepare something for a politician. It's talking about giving him advice based on facts, and that what you consider is the truth, and the truth is based on a method. So not getting politics into moral, but politics is to get into conflict and to have several proposals. And so that's a kind of duty for the media and for those serving a country, saying, hey, there are several options, and there's not only one good moral option, and you have to follow that moral option, because you're in the field of politics, and in the field of politics, you have to present several options, and you have to get into a fight, into a difficult and challenging conversation with your own society, and then you have to prove your leadership. So it's not being good, it's doing the right thing.
Let me just put that important question from Nadine Bhutto. Can you elaborate on the role of the media, blah, blah, blah. Changing the narrative means involving all of them, and that's not just the media, but also NGOs as regards to the communication aspect of shaping public perceptions and how communications must change. Gianni.
I think this is a very difficult question, because it presumes that there is a sort of center who is able to give directions and then the other follow. And I think in an open society we have different clustering actors who are also fighting each other, or are not agreeing and are discontenting each other on different issues. For that reason, maybe we have to go back in history and also to see how after strong and heavy crises, like, let's say like the crisis of '29 or after World War II, nevertheless, there was a sort of frame, embedded frame, in which certain categories were shared. And I would say this was only possible because at that time there was the economic axis, which was important, sharing between left and right, because there were compromises, important compromises. The question is, are we able, if the social cultural axis is now becoming much more important, to find compromises on this axis? And this will give us basically indications in which direction the narrative could go.
What do you think, Laurie? Given that you think about this.
Well, I think an old narrative, but one that's very strongly said today, is about the narrative that immigrants and refugees are different. And really, they're looking for the same thing that everybody is. They're looking for a safe life, a better life. The average person doesn't want to hurt you, doesn't want to change your culture, doesn't want to change your religion. And I think that this narrative of difference is very much what plays into the minds of a lot of people when they think of immigration. And then if we layer on the problem of people have thinking about the future, I'm worried about the future, I'm worried about getting a job, I'm worried about getting a job for my kids, that sort of thing. You layer those on and people start to add them together. And so that's a problem. And it's not, I don't want to beat up on the media or politicians, but you can't do that in 2 minutes. And most people don't eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff too. So these narrative changes, these idea changes are going to take some time and effort.
They want answers in 8 seconds now anyway.
Yes, but we can't prevent to discuss hard problems. The figure, for instance, if we make a taboo not to speak about figures, we ignore the reality that we have to be aware that when there are too many people coming at a certain moment, that creates more problems than to have average rate. That's one case. The other case is the fear of the people, what will be my future? So we have to avoid to discuss only the refugee problems, but to do it in the context, what is the situation of the people around them. For both it is a problem. So the narrative plays a big role, not solving all the problems, because neither the politicians can have the solution, but the solution is more and more a process of interaction, a process of dialogue, a process of different views. So we need this in our society, and if we say don't speak about it, we create more problems than solutions, and the solution has to be found by mutual speaking.
Hannah Wurzel has a point here about, which is for you, I think, Laurie, about how to increase participation, particularly from Muslims, lowering barriers for migrants and Muslims to enter the public sphere and take an active role in shaping it, both you and Gianni.
That's a good question. Trying to think about ways that we can encourage people to enter the political realm when it is so scary. So politicians in my country and other countries, media personnel who are Muslim are targets of all kinds of victimization. So my colleagues have files and files of emails full of hate. And so when faced with those kinds of activities, why would you want to be involved? And so thinking about ways of trying to help the people who are already active become more active and to become protected from this kind of hate speech, which, 5 years ago, people wouldn't sign their names to their emails. Now they're signing their names to their emails. So that danger is increasing, even in my country where people think that immigration's all hunky-dory and everybody's happy. It's not the case.
I think it's important to, I think it's an issue which refers to individuals and contacts, and it's important to have, create areas in which people can have contacts to any sort of other people. I think the contacts are basically the best thing in order to inform and see how others are living their lives. I think this, and the other point is basically institutions are also important. Schooling, work, parties, associations, any sort of groups who are organized have to open and also accept that there are now other clientele which is here and that they have to refer to it. Basically, we can't change or have a mutual change if we do not acknowledge that there has been a change, and that's also one of the cleavages of our...
All right, we're almost at an end. Anyone burning to say something, frustration, or with a great idea? We're looking for takeoffs and takeaways in a moment. Can I just go to the lady at the back?
I just want to remind us of a line that Ali Noorani, who heads the National Immigration Center in Washington, D.C., said during the Aurora dialogues in Yerevan. He said, "We like the Jose and the Mohammed we know. We're afraid of the Jose and the Mohammed we don't know."
Or we think we don't know, perhaps.
I would like to recommend to remember to Ralph Dahrendorf and use the frame of what can we do to develop a sense of belonging. Not speaking about refugees and integration or migration or whatever. What is our common future and what do we need to develop a sense of belonging to who are coming and to those who are already living here?
Andreas, say you don't want to answer this if you don't want to answer it, but obviously we're in a fascinating time in Germany, historically, politically, since for so many reasons which you know better than me. But what does a government, what does a civil service do in this situation when it has to make policy recommendations on something like this? Are you lining up a number of options which the coalition can then adopt depending on the political complexion of it?
The coalition is to be dealt out between the political parties.
Sure.
So I stopped working.
You're doing nothing? You're doing nothing at the moment?
Well, I'm working in administration.
Okay.
And the political parties are to negotiate a coalition.
But you can prepare options for policy issues like migration,
I do my,
refugees.
well, as I told you, the political parties are leading the negotiations and I'm working in administration and I'm doing my administrative work. And what we did in the last years, let me give you an idea. So we have oriented our cultural policies towards the topic of giving access to culture and education. So we started a program with 11 million for scholars at risk, called the Philip Schwartz Initiative. I'm going down I'm preparing a program called For Artists at Risk. We did a program, Leadership on Syria, keeping in 200 people from Syria doing studies in Germany to be part of the former elite. The Secretary General of the Goethe Institute tomorrow sent me an SMS saying, hey, I'm here in Lebanon, in Beirut, in a refugee camp, where I'm just visiting a project we have financed 2 years ago. So we oriented even the work of the Goethe Institutes toward the refugee crisis, saying that access to culture and education has to be part of our humanitarian aid in the refugee camps. So that's what we are doing as an administration, and I hope we will continue to do so.
All right, so life doesn't stop because politicians haven't managed to negotiate their agreement yet. Can I thank you all very much indeed? To be continued, and thanks for all your comments.